Hello, I'm here to talk about Rpki. It's just me today and other stories. But the first thing I thought is very interesting is Rpki, which stands for Resource Public Key Infrastructure. And I didn't know about this, but I found an article from Cloudflare from 2018 explaining it. One common question that comes up in class is students ask me about the security of Border Gateway Protocol. Border Gateway Protocol is used to route traffic between internet service providers, so any traffic that goes any large distance has to pass through it, and it has been notoriously insecure right from the beginning of the internet, using unauthenticated signals, and there's a long chain of serious traffic flow and security incidents caused by this, both as deliberate attacks to intercept traffic and as mistakes made by defective products or errors made by administrators. And I was not aware of this, but Rpki is the official solution, which adds cryptographic signatures to BGP route announcements so you can make sure that the route announcements are coming from the correct autonomous system, which is the name for ISPs and other large organizations that have access to the internet backbone. So it's well-defined, and NIST has an Rpki monitor, which shows that like IP version 6, it has slowly been increasing since 2014. And it's not yet up to 50%. So it is like border DNSSEC or IP version 6. There are these improvements to the internet that get proposed, but they don't have any huge immediate need to be deployed. The internet is still working, and they improve something, but they're sort of complicated and expensive to implement, and most people just don't bother. And so it's a slow process over a decade or more for these things to roll out. Unfortunately, the security measures like Rpki and DNSSEC will only really help us once they're fully deployed and everybody has them everywhere, because nobody can enforce them until everybody's playing the game, or you will cause sites that aren't encrypted to vanish. So it's happening, but at the current rate, it'll be several years yet before we actually have much protection against Border Gateway Patrol mistakes and attacks. This is one of the reasons Mudge testified before Congress something like 25 or 30 years ago and said, I could take down the whole internet at any time in just a few minutes by messing with Border Gateway Protocol. And that still remains true largely. And we're all just sort of ignoring it, but it's a weak system and it needs to be updated, and they have the update. So I'd like to see this make more progress. The IRS is now going to purchase NetFlow data from Team Kimbrew. This Team Kimbrew connects to internet service providers, and they get NetFlow data, which doesn't contain individual people's personal communications, but it tells you which network has been talking to which other network over what protocol. And this is possibly information you could de-anonymize and find secrets about people. You could find a lot of information in there. They call it the world's largest threat intelligence data ocean. You just have a large portion of all the traffic on the world, on the internet, available for you to inspect. And then you can find things like traffic to command and control servers, and you probably could find a lot more other things. For example, one thing you could do, which people are very interested in, is you could probably predict stock market trends. You could find out how many people are visiting a website about a stock product, and therefore see how popular it is early and things like that. It's not clear why the IRS wants it. The U.S. military and FBI purchased it, and as I said, stock market speculators. But it appears that the IRS just wants to defend their network, and they're getting this data. But it's going to be a lot of work to analyze. So what most people do is purchase threat intelligence feeds, which are from companies that take data like this and boil it down to actionable intelligence, like block these IP addresses or something. And I would think that would be more what IRS wants. The only reason to purchase the raw data is if you want to do some analysis to find something that nobody else is looking for. And I wouldn't think the IRS would be an organization doing that. So perhaps we'll find out more about this. There's a write-up of a Tesla exploit that earned this researcher a bug bounty, and it's really, I thought, quite interesting. He had previously analyzed Tesla and found that inside Tesla, Tesla employees can access a dashboard that has personal information about Tesla customers, And that in itself is not a bad thing. But then it made him think that if he could somehow make an account that had the same email address as an insider, he might be able to access that tool. And what he did was discover that Tesla has multiple identity providers, which is not that rare a thing where you have a partner organization or second set of servers to authenticate. But what it means is they may not synchronize completely. And in fact, he found that you could create an account on one of them with any email address, and it would not send you an email and force you to click a link like it should. You could make an account for an email address you did not control, and it wouldn't stop you. And then he went on the internet and found the email addresses of a lot of Tesla employees from the past, some of whom had probably stopped being at Tesla and were no longer using that email address. And he found he was able to make an account for an ex-employee of Tesla, and that account was still authenticated to have access to this tool. So there are several flaws here. They haven't properly synchronized the data between their identity providers. They haven't verified an email address before making an account, and, which is a very common problem, they haven't removed accounts from people who leave. He found these basic flaws. What's even more impressive, though, is Tesla actually listened to him and fixed it. He got his bug bounty, and they fixed it within 10 days. That's extremely rare that anybody pays attention that fast. So that part is very good. I mean, everybody can make a mistake, but Tesla does seem to shape up in a hurry. There's another one here. CyberGhost VPN. I wasn't aware of this. It's a VPN client you can use to connect to virtual private network on WireGuard or OpenVPN protocols. And the Linux client had remote code execution, man-in-the-middle, and local privilege escalation. And the technique used to find it I found interesting. For some reason, the Linux client is written in Python and then compiled down to machine code. And if you do that, there's a way to reverse compile it back into readable Python, which is interesting. And that's what he did. Then he read the Python and found that they just made fairly elementary mistakes. There was one API call that did not verify the certificate, so you could man in the middle it. There was the configuration file was implemented by executing a line of code that included user input, so that led to command injection. So you had remote code execution, and there was another local privilege escalation too. And these things are pretty easy to find once you got the source code. So I thought the most interesting part to me there was reversing compiled Python code back into readable Python. That's an interesting process, and I'd like to write a project about that. And the last one that I saw was Google cracking down on predatory loan apps. Last year, an expose came out showing there were hundreds of personal loan apps in the Google Play Store that were predatory. What they did, not in America, but in, I think, Asia, they would loan you money at a low interest rate without requiring much instantly over the internet. And then if you didn't pay it back, they would use the app to access your personal emails and photographs and videos on your phone and threaten to expose you, either revealing embarrassing pictures or taking your contacts list and sending pictures to people in your contacts list to embarrass you. And they use these strong-arm extortion, privacy-invading techniques to compel people to pay. And so months later, Google is now changing the rules. So apps like this are not allowed to access your contacts, photos, or location. So that seems like a good move. And the interesting thing to me is I'm not sure everybody realizes this. Every app on your phone can access all your pictures. I mean, not necessarily every app, but a lot of apps, including apps that have no legitimate reason for it, very often have the ability to access your pictures, your emails, your videos, your contacts list, and you're just trusting those companies not to do bad things. Now, most of the time that works. For example, until the recent rollout of PIN cards in America, chip cards, every single person you did a credit card transaction with had your number and could just take more money out of your account at any time. You're basically handing a wad of blank checks to every person you did a credit card transaction with, and it had been that way since the beginning. And yet, as we all know, most of the time it was okay. So, but you should be aware that putting apps on your phone is taking a similar risk. So, anyway, that's all I had this time. I'll have another one on Tuesday.